Da-da-da-da-da. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is episode 2 of the Read the Fucking DMG Podquest, in which we, myself and Sarge, and a guest like we have today, will discuss some of the finer points of the game that we all love, 5th edition. We take questions from our Patreon, patreon.com/DM Dave, and we try to answer them to the best of our ability without rambling.
As best as
Sarge?
we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun with the last one, and we got a bunch of really great questions. We selected 2 that we're going to focus on today because we think we're going to have a lot to say. But we're excited to introduce you all to TJ this week. TJ works with us as part of our writing team. TJ, go ahead and say hello to the good folks at home.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's TJ. I run the DM tool chest. I've been writing and involved in the D&D communities for about, going on 30 years now, since the late 80s. Linked up with these fine gentlemen just a few months ago, and I've been enjoying it.
Awesome. Yeah, and before we jump into the questions here, as always, make sure to like the video and smash that subscribe button. Just smash it. 1d8 bludgeoning damage to the subscribe button. All right, Sarge. What
my screen's cracked.
Oh no! And what's your and if you are interested in TJ's stuff from the DM tool chest, he's got a little bit more different content than what I have to do, with a whole different look. You've got more focus on creating your own maps and doing some other stuff, right, TJ?
Yeah. So I got just have weekly monsters that I come out. I do a little thing called hashtag Monster Mondays. So I like to give out that. And the big thing is, especially with my Patreon, I like to let them have a little bit more of a control on the content that I do as well. So every month we have a poll where everyone votes in for that theme, and it actually is building the current world that we're all working in, which will eventually lead to a campaign setting that we're all going to be involved in. So it's kind of a very community oriented
I'm gonna
project.
I'm gonna troll your polls now. I'm gonna do it. Hey, everybody, go select this one.
I feel like our patrons sometimes team up and dogpile stuff just to see what we'll come up with whenever we do a poll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
For those of you on YouTube, we'll have a link to TJ's web zone in the description.
Yes,
for you.
It'll be down there. So after you're done smashing the subscribe button, you will click on TJ's Patreon link. Click and smash.
All right. So our first question, this is a pretty exciting one. I'm excited to see what we come up with. We'll start with Dave. Our first question of this week's episode is, what do you think, in your 30 plus years of D&D, is the least important aspect of the game?
The least important aspect? Planning. Honestly, I think a lot of people think you have to do like an absurd amount of planning to run D&D, and it's funny. Like I knew this question was coming. I didn't really think about it until just now. It just popped in my head because I didn't plan it. And basically, like I think you'll see a lot of people, they really like freak themselves out, like, oh gosh, I got to do all this planning and stuff. And then I think, like, a big realization that I've had over the years is that you really don't have to plan a lot to make D&D happen. A large part of that is thanks probably to like the modern design of modules. They're a lot easier to like kind of like flip through and grok and kind of figure out what is going on in it without having to like read like a wall of text like you did in some of the older ones. But also too, like once you know where all of your resources are, particularly like I'd say like random tables, name generators, like how to find a map really quick and get it uploaded. And that this is not even like counting like using a VTT or something, which makes it even easier than before. It's really like simple to just like know what you're getting into without having to like spend hours and hours of like putting all this shit together to plan out, what's going on. And once you really understand the fundamentals of the rules, you've read your fucking DMG, and like how to balance encounters and what it takes to balance an encounter. It gets to be like pretty simple. a buddy of ours, Charlie, who runs he's in Europe, so he runs a lot of what games would be like early for our time, but he does almost like exclusively tables. Like he'll throw in a few one shots here and there to like, but in the in between areas and what happens with the characters and stuff as they go through, it's almost all totally random encounters and tables. We did it. I was in one of his, and I don't play often, but I like playing in Charlie's games because they're a lot of fun, and you never know what's going to happen. They we're on a boat, and he's got like these random tables for boats, which are like famous, and he doesn't plan any of this shit. And like I think what had happened, like we ran into a ghost ship in one case, which is pretty cool, and he knows exactly where to find a ghost ship right away. So he downloaded it from Limithron and already had it ready and up. And then we had like a were shark encounter, and all this is totally random, and it totally, it ended up killing like some of the important NPCs, which really, throws like an interesting dynamic into the game. So, so I'm not rambling too much on this. Really, once you know like how to run the game and not overthink it, not only is the game easier to play, but it's also like fun for you as a DM because you don't know what the hell is going to happen either. And like when you read a module like cover to cover, like every beat of it, right? But with this, it's like I don't know what's going to happen. It could be totally random. So yeah, for sure, I think like over planning is definitely like a needless aspect of this game.
All right. I have some interesting responses to that. I think I want to see what TJ has to say first, though.
Oh, Lord.
What do you think? What do you think is the least important part of D&D?
It's funny because I'm coming kind of from that same direction that Dave did with after so long being involved with this. It's and seeing so many different editions and kind of the different focuses they have. One of the things that I guess I'd answer this is it's hard to answer because everyone has a different personal preference on the different level of importance of what aspects are least important to most important. There's a kind of a spectrum that's I know people who will gloss over the foraging, for instance, and the travel aspect. So like, hey, we're like A to B, and it's like as an adventure writer, I actually put that as something that's important because I like to have that kind of that level of detail in there. So I'll actually write foraging and rules for some adventures, and some people just like that. I'm not going to even use that. I had someone tell me like they're going to use one of my adventures in their podcast, but they were just like, well, we're not going to take the winter the extreme cold rules. We're just going to completely ignore that because we don't want to bother with that.
Oh.
And so it's like it's just one of those things where it's actually interesting because from some people who have the downtime, that's their most important aspect, and for other people that's the least important aspect.
Yeah. People
just gloss over that completely. I guess for me, and I might get some flame for this, especially since we focused as writers on the mechanics of writing adventures, is literally the mechanics, the rule of cool versus the raw.
What?
Yeah, right. I know.
That's it. Is there a way to boot someone out of a team?
Good call. You can kick him out.
Don't hang me.
I've had enough. I've heard enough.
But yeah, I guess for me, it's always about having an encounter that plays out as fun and memorable. Is far more important than having it play out mechanically perfect.
Yeah.
And so I guess to me is like the mechanics, I guess, would be that least important personally for me as a writer. Like I feel those memories are made when you have those chances and you have those, when you're behind that screen, when you're like, okay, you know what, this seems like it's going to be play out much more fun if I actually let them do that, even though the rules say like, man, I probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's a big question we get a lot too, is how to balance, because I know that we know the rules back and forth, upside down, left and right, and the people will ask us like, oh, what do you think of rule of cool versus this? I'm like, well, it really depends on the situation. Like honestly, like critting a skill, like I'm out on, because it's like, well, it doesn't make sense. Like, but like I've had sessions where, I think once I don't know how to. It's so complicated. I can't even start with. But basically, the too long didn't read is like Jordan, one of my players, hit Cthulhu in the head with a giant rock that he was flying on.
This
And
is
I
a
said,
great
yeah,
story we should tell for the podcast.
it's like, and I pretty much was like, well, there's really nothing in the rules that says it, and it's kind of like a little bit too powerful. But I'll tell you what, if you roll a 20, I'll let this happen. And then he rolled 20, of course. That's the way it goes.
Of course he did, Jordan.
And well, maybe he did. I don't know. This was in real life play. This was back before COVID, so I don't know what he rolled, but he says he rolled a 20. I think I looked at it. I think I looked at it. Calling the field, etc. My dogs are exploding in the background. I let it hit Cthulhu in the head. So but yeah, like it really just depends on the situation. Like if it's just your average thing, then let the rules run it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe, but if it's like, if you're foraging, for example.
Everyone needs to know how to forage. They do. I swear they do.
Man, I tell you, that's because WotC dropped the ball on exploration, and
they did.
And the fact that it was like jammed in, like, oh, this is one of the 3 pillars, but we're really not. We're gonna give it like 3 pages in the PHP. But look out for combat. Okay, we got plenty about that. But yeah, and then like shoving it into the DMG and then trying to like come back with what's a book that really covers combat, or not combat, exploration. Like Ghostmarsh does a pretty good job.
Ghostmarsh tries.
Tomb of Annihilations probably goes too far under that end of the spectrum, where it's like, okay, we don't need fucking 6 sessions of struggling through a jungle. But I personally, I like the exploration stuff, especially at early levels. Yeah, I think you can hand wave it in the high tiers, because I mean, like a level 17 party doesn't need to like hump it to a town and hear about every step of the way. But those first level guys, absolutely. If you trip on a rock, you're probably gonna die, so we need to roleplay that.
I think for me, and I'm a 5th edition player, I joined the game in the last like 5 years properly. I think this is maybe just reacting to some of the cultural depictions of the game. I personally think the least important part of the game is honestly ego at the table, especially DM ego. I feel like almost every time.
Why are you guys going to keep attacking me like this? This is bullshit.
I feel like almost all the time when there are issues at the table or a campaign is dying, it comes back to most of the time the DM's perceived role of being in control of everything that's going on. And I think that's where the relying more on tables helps you, staying inspired by what happens at the table. Like I'm currently running for some friends so I can run some easy content, the sequel to Dragon of Icespire Peak. And I randomly decided that the NPC from last session who asked the party to go look for some missing people married the NPC they rescued, because the party happened to go talk to the local cleric that week, and I wanted her to be busy with something else going on. I wanted to attach it to something they'd already done. I think more often than not, you have to keep the game evolving in response to what the players are doing, and I think more often than not, for all the stuff that goes on in the game, we lose that stuff. And I feel like almost every time when I'm dealing with stress at the table, it's usually ego issues, sometimes mine as the DM, sometimes mine as a player competing with what the DM wants to happen in the world. Like mechanically, if you would ask me what's like the least important part of the game, it might be some of the older conditions, because the game doesn't really do a great job using some of them. Like I don't think 5th edition does a lot mechanically with the deafened condition.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked about how the exhaustion rules are pretty brutal, but deeply underutilized in the game because it's so difficult to get rid of. And that kind of links back into the underdeployment of exploration. If the party was forced to march longer to reach places, maybe exhaustion would come up more. But there's most of the time when we talk about the least important aspect of the game, for me, it's usually because people are less aware of what's in the DMG. Like we get so much feedback all the time about how to handle social encounters at the table. The DMG has very clear guidance about how to establish whether or not an NPC is going to be hostile, indifferent, or friendly to the party. And it has a very straightforward table with 3 levels about how a creature that is at that current state with the party will respond to social interaction with pretty bog standard DCs. And they say if the party says something really inspiring, they can adjust an NPC in one conversation by 1 step. So if you walk into a room and you start hollering at some goblins, they might be hostile to you.
Yeah.
At the most you could do is make them indifferent and be like, whoa, we're not trying to fight. Calm down. And then you can be like, all right, well, where's your boss? Oh, he's over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a big problem that 5th edition has is that it continues the tradition of separating everything that you need to know into 3 books. Now, I would argue that like Monster Manual is fine to be separate because it's really just an encyclopedia, right, for monsters. But like the DMG and Player's Handbook are really like 2 sides of the same coin. And if you, I mean, yeah, I would say Player's Handbook is really good with describing like how to create a character, and how to run combat and all the spells that you need to know. But where it fails is those middle chapters, like the skills, the adventuring. I think it's like chapters 7 and 8, the ones that come right before combat but are in between. They're like the lost chapters in there. Those are the ones I think like they really needed that DM side of like how to structure them and how to get them all together. And you'll see that in a lot of like other campaign systems like Call of Cthulhu, or I think I just bought Mutants and Masterminds, even Pathfinder. Like they include that part in the book, so it ties in a lot better. But it's a lot more fun to make money on 3 books than it is to make money on like 1 book. So
we talked about that with the DMG too. Like one of the things we've lamented, even in the last podcast, is that it starts really wide and then kind of overwhelms people. I like thinking about the PHB. Like the PHB has a step-by-step building Bruner process. I kind of wish the DMG had a building baby's first adventure as a step-by-step sort of guideline in it.
Yeah, I mean, we're actually hosting a course right now, and we'll probably put a link in it, but it's a free course on how to build adventures, because frankly, even today when I was putting together a slide for like how to balance encounters, I'm like, God damn, this shit's complicated. Like this is like a lot of nitty gritty stuff, and it's not like it's really easy to pass over, and like it's such a mystery to be like, how do I make it like fun with lots of encounters? And that's why now you see like it's like Battle Map City with D&D, like go here and fight that giant thing. Anyways, I think let's move on to the second question. What's next for us, Tom?
Yeah, this one's actually pretty good. I think this is going to allow us to talk about some sort of really interesting parts of our own design process too. Patron asked us, when we're writing content, how much consideration do we give to audiences outside of America? Does it ever affect our decision making in terms of something like political correctness?
That's a pretty, I want to hear TJ's response on that, because he's just come into the writing fold, and kind of want to see what his thought is before I fuck it up by sharing.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking about this question, and if it struck me is one of the things is like personally, honestly, I don't give any audience a specific consideration, whether it be, being in the America, being outside. I guess personally, I find I try to focus on moral dilemmas that are kind of more universal. That it doesn't matter what culture you come from, these problems can be addressed by anybody or experienced by anybody. But as to the second part of that question about the political correctness, that's the one that kind of like made me think. And I guess this is one of those problems that I see, or one of these discussions I see happen all the time. About how we address these topics of say slavery, racism, religious wars, all these things that we live in we deal in a fantasy world that has all of these things in them.
Yeah.
And I think it gives us a unique opportunity to remember that A, it's a fantasy world. B, we are literally creating heroes to address these issues. We give the opportunity for these players to actually fight and affect their world where, we might not have that ability here in a real world. So it's a way to tell these stories and give people a chance to see how actions can actually influence reality, or in this case, a fantasy world that can translate back to reality. So yeah, I guess that's one of those things that for me personally as a writer, I see it as that opportunity to give these moral dilemmas to the players and see how they respond.
Yeah.
I think I have probably the most interesting perspective because my primary role around here is editorial. So I have to read everybody's content around here. When I'm dealing with our writers, whenever I think the writer is potentially going to deal with a hot button topic, I usually will force them to make that the point of the adventure. If you want to deal with something that's going to make audiences reckon with uncomfortable topics, you really need to make that the thrust of the adventure. It can't just be a throwaway scene for flavor in the middle of it. So if you want to address slavery in your game, it has to really be maybe the whole point of your game, because it's not not flavor. A lot of the times when I think a writer may be accidentally pulling on the wrong tropes or leaning into maybe some questionable biases, I'll call out something. And we'll adjust an NPC for it. Usually we do what TJ recommends is we focus on the core motivation of the NPCs involved in the adventure to give them context so that the table who's going to run the content can address it within what they want to do at their table. Like, we usually give people straightforward motivations. Like, person wants to make a deal with stronger extraplanar entity to gain wealth or renown in some way by teaming up with them. But I think when you're dealing with hot button topics, you have to go all in on it, and you have to have really clear ideas about it. And you probably should warn people ahead of time when you're going to deal with those sort of things. We typically won't, because we try to make our content universal. Now, as for the international audience, when we write our content, the biggest thing we do, honestly, from a commercial side of this, is we write features the exact same way every single time. Like, we try to make sure that when we describe how to open a door with your thieves tools, we use the exact same wording every single time, so that if you are speaking a non-English language and you've figured out how to translate the text for that, it's the same every time, so that you understand how it works and however you've come to understand the game, considering you're trying to parse English, whether you're familiar with the language or not. That's probably the biggest way we try to help international audiences. We're very neurotic around here about the structure of the content. We want to make sure that we present the information the exact same way every single time, so that you get used to interacting with our content, so you're not lost trying to read new stuff, even if you're maybe not familiar with the English language.
Yeah, I think Ducky, who's one of our writers too, their big like aha moment when they started getting into the writing was that this is even though we deal with fiction and fantasy worlds, ultimately this is technical writing, right? We're writing a rule book which the DMs of the games have to be able to grok pretty quickly and translate it into a a scenario. And yeah, you got to be pretty standard with that. So there's no like instinctual like, oh, I just kind of wrote it because it's like, well, there's 40 plus years of design that goes into this game, and it's there for a reason. And we too have our own testing and stuff where we have to understand it, because language barriers, things like that. And really just like, ideally you want somebody to pick up your stuff and not have any questions about how to run it. They're like, oh, okay, I understand this, and like I understand how it's written. So that's why we try to like duplicate also WotC's methods, because they're going to be used to running like Curse of Strahd. So we want them to like immediately be able to run Curse of Strahd and pick it up and do, Speak with Dead or one of our adventures, which, is written in very much the same manner. Yeah, kind of go back with the controversial topics. It's kind of interesting. because this is something that's come up with us a few times. When we first started with Roll20, for example, originally Quabus is what name was what? The
It
slave
was
pits of Quabus,
it
I
was
think.
Slave Pits Aquabus, and Roll20's content rules do not allow adventure content to explore those because they don't want to have to moderate that on their platform.
Right. And they're a lot. They're 10 times the size of us, so they've got a few more people to please. And what's interesting is like when I started writing it, my thought wasn't like, oh, I'm going to exploit slavery. But then again, I am like almost a middle-aged white male living in America, so my view of the world is going to be a little bit different than someone like Sarge or someone from another country. So yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. I could change that. We'll turn it to Prisoners of Quabus and call it a deal. I was basing it originally off of the old, I want to say the A series from first edition, which was the whole Slave Pits series, Slave Lords of, I can't remember what they're called, but there's like 4 different adventures. That's all like the Slave Lords, blah blah blah, the Slave Pits of this, Salt on the Area, the Slave Lords. So I was kind of basing it a little bit on that. And then there's been other subjects too where I've been writing and I'm like, I need to think about who is receiving this, not just like in America, but like as a broad audience. So for example, like I really want to write like a campaign setting that's in Mesoamerica, right? And I've touched on it a little bit because I find it's really interesting, and I like especially like Mexico in the 1950s and the whole luchador culture and stuff like that. But then again, here I am, almost I'll keep saying almost until June, almost middle-aged white American male. It's like the whole Disney thing. Like when they make a movie that's going to be Black Panther, do they get some white guy to direct Black Panther, or do they get Ryan Coogler? Or is it Coogler or Coogler? Coogler.
It's Googling.
Okay. If they make Miss Marvel, do they get a male director or do they get a female director? And like when I'm creating content that's focuses on a different part of the world, is it cool for me to write it, or will it come off as like too stereotypical, or like
Cultural tourism?
Yeah. Like will it hit the wrong notes? So it can be kind of I don't want to the white man's burden, I can't write about this. I don't want to be like Scarlett Johansson and say, if I want to play a tree, I'll play a fucking tree. Like I want to be considerate of those things. Because this is we're definitely a more enlightened society than we were when D&D started. And if you look at the fantasy genre as a whole, a lot of the people who helped create the fantasy worlds that we love were kind of terrible people. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we all know how terrible Lovecraft was. Tolkien was probably not that great of a guy. Robert Jordan was, not that great of a guy. But these are the people who laid the foundation for these worlds, and a lot of that still comes over. I mean, look at D&D. It still says, "Oh, what race are you?" And if you're this race, you're going to be this much better. And like D&D is like, maybe it's time to get rid of some of these things.
Yeah, I mean, shit, really struggling with that right now with their content.
Second edition, there were rules for women and men, which gave you different features on based if you were male or female. So I mean, we've come away from that, but it's still hard because the foundation's laid. So it's constantly like a question of like, all right, like, yeah, like obviously if Nazis are going to be in it, you make them the bad guys, right? And I think sometimes you have to think about that, like you said, Sarge, like it can't just be for flavor. It can't be like Dark Sun where like 1/3 of the people are slaves. As much as I love Dark Sun, it's like if it ever gets translated to 5th edition, I'll be really surprised. Because there's some sketchy topics in Dark Sun that are totally a product of like 1991 or 92 or whenever the hell it came out. But yeah, you can't just do that for flavor. It's like, oh, there's a dude over there, like, being a shithead to some woman. It's like, no, it needs to be the focus of it. And I think you're seeing like already like WotC, like for example, they redid Strahd because they were like, maybe this is tied a little bit too much into the old school, like creepy vampire stories. Maybe we need to like revitalize this a bit. But anyways,
yeah, it's one of the pragmatic approach for us as a writer is you see WotC struggle with this. Like WotC has not left the Sword Coast in 5th edition.
Oh God, yeah.
They don't want to step on people's toes because they got they got a lot of negative feedback for what they did with the Far East and old WotC products, and you see
And the
them
South.
and you see them concerned about what they're going to do with the area south of the Sword Coast, because that's very much a Mediterranean, Middle Eastern inspired
Hmm.
portion of their world on Toril and Faerun, and they haven't hired people to help them write that kind of content,
Mm-mm.
and so they haven't touched it. And I think it can be a little bit frustrating because it sometimes feels like we're just going to play around in fantasy Britain forever as a result.
Yeah.
Because of the
Mixed with a
people who
little
are
bit of
writing
like
it.
frontier America, but yeah.
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 But I think when you're writing your content, the best way you can handle dealing with those kind of things is you want to make your interactions primarily, I would say, political if they're going to be fraught, and you should establish the baseline for them and where they come from and how
Mhm.
they express themselves in your world. And then you want to give the party some sort of interesting way to contextualize that for themselves. Because if the players don't really have access to it, it can just surprise them out of the blue. And I would recommend, if you're running personally at your table, you not surprise your players with uncomfortable topics,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, for sure.
that's really rude, to put it mildly. So
No one likes being ambushed.
you don't want to do that at your table. Professionally, I think you just write tight content and you let the people who are going to run your content add whatever personal flavor they want to as well. Like,
Yeah.
I tend to add more brown people to my game. I tend to add more non-straight people to my game. But that's the table I run.
Yeah. Yeah. I just enter caps every adventure.
Ettercaps and doppelgangers.
Yeah.
Dave has ettercaps and doppelgangers. I have dragons and goblins.
Dude,
That's
this new one I was writing, I was like, and this person is a doppelganger. No, I'm not doing it again.
Yeah,
Never had it
the secret to Dave's world is everyone's secretly a doppelganger. That's it.
Yes,
as long as you
Dave,
keep that in mind, you're good.
Yes, Dave's players. You have to have a druid at Dave's game. You should need Moonbeam.
Yeah. Do doppelgangers know that other people are doppelgangers? I guess they can all read each other's thoughts, so sure. All right. Well, I think that's running us up on time. Let's pimp our links, and we'll close it out. TJ, you got anything left for us? Are you a doppelganger, TJ?
Cast Moonbeam.
I am not the doppelganger you think I am.
Oh no, they can just read minds. They can't change minds. So watch out there.
Anyway, all right. Yeah, no, I just want to thank you guys for having me on. This has been fun. How much I love talking to you guys, and we can sit here and talk for hours on this. We love this so much, and it's such a great opportunity to be here with you. So yeah, as we said at the beginning, if you guys want to check out my stuff, www.thedmtoolchest.com. I have plenty of content you can take a look at there. You can sign up for my mailing list, which gets you a free adventure. That's one of my favorites. Also, if you feel like jumping on my Patreon, it's patreon.com//the DM tool chest. Don't forget that's the one that tricks people up.
Right.
But thank you so much for having me on it. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah. And of course, you know us. You can get us at patreon.com/DMDave. We've got a class we're offering tonight, so if you go on there, you will be able to automatically sign up with that. Don't forget to like this and smash it. And also, of course, as always, don't forget, read the fucking DMG. All right.
Please.
See you guys later. Thanks so much.
Take it easy.